Hey everyone, Israel is currently in a war against the terror organization Hamas, and we know how hard it can be to keep up with all the news. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of the latest developments out of Israel, we're here for you. I'm Ladarga Velazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
Israel and the U.S. are closely coordinating on an effort to defend and counter the expected retaliation from the Islamic Republic of Iran for the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran last week. The U.S. is deploying additional military resources in the region amid reports that the attack could come as early as tomorrow. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz reports.
U.S. General Michael Kurilla, who heads U.S. forces in the Middle East, is in Israel to consult and coordinate with military leaders ahead of a possible attack from Iran in retaliation for the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Kurilla met Chief of Staff Halevi as Washington and Jerusalem attempt to mobilize the same international and regional coalition that defended Israel against an attack from Iran on April 13th. The U.S. is boosting its forces in the Middle East, sending additional warships and fighter jets to the region. U.S. officials say they are expecting a potential attack that is larger in scope and could involve Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies. According to Axios, the U.S. reportedly believes that the attack could begin as early as tomorrow. On a political level, U.S. Defense Secretary Austin is coordinating with Defense Minister Gallant.
Secretary Austin spoke with Israeli Minister of Defense Gallant this morning about the destabilizing threats posed by Iran, its partners, and proxies. The secretary reiterated ironclad support for Israel's security and informed the minister of additional measures to include ongoing and future defensive force posture changes that the department will take to support the defense of Israel. He also stressed that the unprecedented scale of U.S. support for Israel since October 7th should leave Iran, Lebanese Hezbollah, and other Iranian-backed terrorist groups with no doubt about U.S. resolve.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel is prepared for any potential attack.
ישראל נמצאת במוכנות גבוהה מאוד לכל תרחיש, הן בהגנה, הן בהתקפה. אנחנו נגבה מחיר כבד מאוד על כל מעשה תוקפנות נגדנו, מכל זירה שהיא.
Jordan will be a key stop on General Kurilla's trip. The Jordanians played a significant role during the April 13th attack by intercepting Iranian drones that entered their territory, headed for Israel.
President Joe Biden is changing his tone on hostage negotiations and pressuring Israel once again. The president spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu about the progress of hostage negotiations in the aftermath of the Haniyeh assassination and is apparently not so impressed by Israel's efforts. Let's take a closer look.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated he believes reaching a hostage for ceasefire deal is possible and that talks will continue next week in Cairo. But when he told President Biden that this week, Biden reportedly told him to stop BSing. The Biden administration has been critical of Israel's actions in Gaza for many months and even expressed concerns about the assassination of arch-terrorist Ismail Haniyeh. During the call between Netanyahu and Biden, Biden called the assassination poorly timed and emphasized how it could start a regional war. Since Biden dropped out of the presidential race, there are concerns in the White House that Netanyahu is emboldened to take steps he otherwise wouldn't. At the end of the conversation, Netanyahu was also reportedly warned not to take Biden for granted. Yesterday, a team was sent to Cairo for indirect talks as Hamas and Qatar have refused to participate in talks over the killing of Haniyeh. Hamas, on the other hand, has repeatedly tried to change the deal terms to enable their survival as leaders in Gaza. Following the call between the two leaders, the Biden administration urged Israel to act on the deal, implying the obstacle was Israel and not Hamas. Despite the tough phone conversation, Prime Minister Netanyahu emphasized that President Biden respects Israeli sovereignty and cares about the survival and safety of the state of Israel.
And moving on, Kamala Harris
has selected a vice presidential candidate. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has all the details.
Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris has selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her vice president running mate. But until a few hours ago, we thought that America had a chance at a Jewish VP. Jewish Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, 51, gained prominence in the party and enjoyed high approval ratings in Pennsylvania. With 19 electoral votes, Pennsylvania is crucial for Harris and Trump to win. If he had been chosen, Shapiro would have potentially become the first Jewish vice president, bringing historical significance to the ticket. Shapiro's firm stance on Israel could have distanced some progressive voters, which is maybe why Harris chose not to select him. However, it could have attracted moderates and countered Republican attempts to use the Israel-Gaza conflict against Democrats. His outspoken support for Israel would have come at a time when Harris is facing criticism from pro-Israel activists. Shapiro was sworn into his role last year on a stack of Hebrew Bibles that came from the site of the 2018 Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. He is a Jewish day school graduate and sends his kids to the same school. The family attends the conservative Beth Shalom congregation in Elkins Park. However, there were questions around his potential candidacy, in that there were fears that anti-Semitism against Shapiro or any Jewish candidate could have harmed the Harris ticket. Nonetheless, Pennsylvania residents said they were excited at Harris's potential pick.
I think Governor Shapiro is an excellent choice for Vice President Harris. I think he would do a lot of great things for the country and be able to tackle some hard issues. And it's a swing state. That's an important thing as well.
Vice President Harris announced Walz at around 4 p.m. Israel time, shortly before what will soon be their joint appearance at Temple University in Philadelphia. This rally will begin a 5-day, 7-city tour through key battleground states, leading to the November 5 election. Choosing a running mate was vital for Harris as she prepares to face Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump and his VP pick, Senator J.D. Vance.
And moving on, at least 5 American personnel were injured on Monday in an attack against a U.S. military base, the Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq. According to reports, 2 Katyusha rockets were fired by Iran-backed terror proxies and managed to fall inside the base. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said this marked a dangerous escalation. In a call with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Austin said that the attack demonstrated Iran's destabilizing role in the region, and added that the U.S. would further strengthen its military posture in the Middle East in response. During the call, Austin also reiterated the U.S.'s unwavering commitment to Israel's security in the face of threats from Iran, Hezbollah, and the other Iranian terror proxies in the region. And Arab countries are also trying to de-escalate tensions ahead of an expected Islamic Republic attack on Israel. The Jordanian foreign minister visited Tehran for the first time in some 20 years, with a plea to end the violence. Meanwhile, scenes from Beirut's international airport show a mass exodus as countries are urging their citizens to leave immediately by any means possible. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi concluded a rare visit to Iran on Sunday in an attempt to de-escalate tensions in the region. While there, the foreign minister met with Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. This marks the first meeting between high-level Jordanian and Iranian officials in Tehran in some 20 years. Safadi's visit to Iran follows continued diplomatic contacts by the United States and its partners, including France, Britain, Italy, and Egypt, to prevent further regional escalation following the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, which Iran attributes to Israel. Iran and Jordan are also seeking to improve relations following recent tensions, including Jordan's participation in the interception of drones and missiles fired from Iran in its first ever direct attack on Israel last April. Meanwhile, Jordan and other Arab countries have urged their citizens to leave Lebanon ahead of the expected retaliation. The U.S., UK, and others have already urged their citizens to leave by any means possible. Scenes from Beirut's airport showed long lines and a mass exodus of foreigners from the country. Most major international airlines have canceled flights to Iran, Lebanon, and Israel as concerns continue to grow over a wider regional conflict.
This morning in Israel, there was a tragic terror attack in which 2 individuals were killed and 2 more were seriously injured. Security forces are actively confronting threats on multiple fronts in Israel. Police killed the terrorist who murdered the 2 in the stabbing attack in Holon this morning. And this was as the IDF is actively confronting terrorists in Gaza, Lebanon, and in Judea and Samaria. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
An elderly couple was murdered and at least 2 others injured during a terrorist rampage in the central city of Holon. The Palestinian attacker began his deadly assault by attacking multiple victims in a park and then moved toward the nearby bus station. The other victims are reported in critical to moderate condition. The assailant was shot dead by security forces arriving on the scene. According to police, the attacker is a Palestinian from the territories identified as 34-year-old Omar Audeh from the city of Salfit. In Judea and Samaria, 9 Palestinian gunmen were killed in 2 Israeli drone strikes near Tulkarem. In the first incident, the IDF targeted a cell of terrorists en route to carrying out an attack and killed all inside. Israeli troops then entered Tulkarem to carry out a counter-terrorism operation. A second drone strike was carried out against the cell of gunmen who opened fire on troops. At least 4 gunmen were reported killed in the second strike. Looking north, Israel is on alert for expected retaliation from Hezbollah for last week's targeted killing of Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr in Beirut. Addressing the funeral from his bunker in Beirut, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah vowed that painful revenge will be exacted on Israel. There has been a return to the tit-for-tat cross-border exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah that have taken place since early October. This weekend, the Air Force eliminated leading terrorist Ali Naza Ali from the Hezbollah Southern Command. Fighter jets targeted terrorist infrastructure and military buildings of Hezbollah in the areas of Tir Harfa and Kafar Kila. Some 30 rocket launches were detected that crossed from Lebanon toward the upper and western Galilee. A crash was detected in the Avivim area. Most of the launches were shot down or fell in open areas. There were no casualties. IDF forces attacked the sources of the fire with artillery, along with additional attacks to remove the threats. And on day 303 of the war in Gaza, in an apparent attempt to retaliate for the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, at least 19 rockets were fired by Hamas at Israel from southern Gaza, in the largest barrage in weeks. There were no reports of injuries, and all the rockets either landed in open areas or were downed by Iron Dome missile defense. The IDF said it carried out drone strikes on the rocket launchers used in the attacks and destroyed them. Meanwhile, the IDF confirmed that it killed a senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander in Gaza as fighting raged in the Strip south and center.
Terror attacks on multiple fronts today. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for a drone attack that critically wounded 1 person and several others in northern Israel. The organization said its attack was aimed at a military base in response to the assassination by Israel yesterday of a commander in the Redwan force. Hezbollah launched multiple drones across the border. Sirens were also heard in the cities of Acre and Nahariya. Several people were wounded. And in a separate incident in Jerusalem, a border police officer was lightly wounded in a stabbing attack at the tunnel's checkpoint. The terrorist arrived at the checkpoint on a bus, which was stopped for inspection. The terrorist then proceeded to stab the officer with a screwdriver, though he also had a knife in his possession. He was eliminated by IDF troops and border police officers on the scene. And moving on, day 305 of the war in Gaza, 7 reservists were seriously wounded in the Strip amid heavy clashes in the south. There were also heavy cross-border exchanges in the north, where an IDF airstrike took out a top Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. ILTV's Steve Libovitz has the story.
The Air Force struck in the area of Iba in South Lebanon, killing Radwan Force commander Ali Jawad. The IDF said his killing is a significant blow to Hezbollah's capabilities to carry out attacks on Israel. Hezbollah did fire missiles and drones into northern Israel. Some exploded in the air, while others were shot down by air defense. Sirens were sounded due to falling shrapnel from interceptors. IDF Chief Halevi and top officers met with leaders of the northern communities largely evacuated since October. Halevi reportedly told them that in the event of war, the IDF foresees a potential 3-day power outage in some cities. There will be breakdowns in water supply that could last days, a disconnection of landlines for up to 8 hours, and cell phone communication for up to 24 hours. There would also be brief local disruptions to radio and internet. Turning to Gaza, where 7 reservists were wounded, 4 of them seriously, in a blast in South Gaza. The army said that they were wounded by an explosive device or grenade hurled at them by a Hamas operative. Air Force jets attacked Deir al-Balach in the central Gaza Strip, destroying terror infrastructure. And forces from the Division 162 are operating in the Rafah area. During the last day, the forces eliminated over 25 terrorists.
And now here to discuss the impact of Yahya Sinwar assuming the position of Ismail Haniyeh is Avi Melamed, Middle East analyst and author. Avi, so great to have you with us. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about the selection of Sinwar to lead the political faction of Hamas? Does this mean Sinwar will be out of hiding?
Thank you for having me. No, the answer for that is no. Actually, it's very interesting because this is a very complex story. Hamas factors present this whole nomination slash election sort of Sinwar as the replacer or the one that replaced Haniyeh as an expression of unity. But beneath the surface, there are totally different things. One of the things that Haniyeh's assassination exposed was this growing inner tension within Hamas that was boosted following October 7 as criticism in the Arab world and the Palestinian on Hamas mounted because of the catastrophe Hamas has inflicted upon the Palestinians. And one of the things it revealed is that beyond the personal rivalries within Hamas, between Haniyeh and Sinwar, between other people in the top leadership, it also basically further sharpened the differences and the power struggle between a couple of camps within Hamas, particularly, namely, the Iranian and the Turkish camp within Hamas. Khaled Mish'al, who is much more affiliated with the Turkish camp, didn't even attend the inauguration of the Iranian new president. So it seems like that there is an attempt of Hamas to send a sign of unity by basically crowning Sinwar as the leader. But as I said before, beneath the surface, the picture is by far much more complex.
Now, what do you think the ramifications will be practically when it comes to hostage negotiations?
Well, the major thing to remember is the following one. In the end of the day, the person that physically holding the hostages, or some of them, is not Haniyeh and it's not Mish'al, it's Sinwar, and he's holding them as an insurance policy. That was the situation before the assassination of Haniyeh, that continues to be the situation following the assassination of Haniyeh. Is it going to further complicate the negotiations deal? Maybe, not necessarily. But we have to bear this thing in mind because in the end of the day, this is the most significant thing to take into consideration when we think about the whole process of the discussions and the negotiations between the sides. Sinwar is interested in an insurance policy, and for him, the best insurance policy is to continue and to hold the hostages as of now, with all the ramifications that comes along with that.
Now, of course, some have said that the selection of Sinwar shows Hamas is determined not to change course. As you mentioned briefly, unity. When it comes to this war, do you agree with this characterization of the, rise of Sinwar to be the leader, or there's simply no one else Hamas wanted to replace Haniyeh?
It seems to me like, and we have to remember that there has been an ongoing debate within Hamas. It didn't start following October 7. It was the way before October 7 between what I call the more pragmatic camp and the more dogmatic camp. And Sinwar definitely is coming from the more dogmatic camp. So now this debate is further boosted following what happened following October 7 and the ramifications on both Hamas and the Palestinians as well in Gaza. We have to remember there is a lot of anger on Hamas and particularly Sinwar, including in Gaza Strip. Now, when we look at the whole picture, the comprehensive picture, sort of speaking to say, one of the interesting things to notice is that in the Arab world, most of the reactions to that step that Hamas basically was doing, most of the reactions are negative in the sense that the Arab world is saying to Hamas, now when you did that, you actually deepen the crisis and deepen the lack of exit from the crisis, and by doing that, basically, you are deepening and dragging the Palestinians into a deepening crisis. One of the most significant things to understand in that context has to do with the question of the day after, because in the Arab world, by the way, many governments and rulers in the Arab world would like to see Hamas vanished in the air. It's not going to happen. But in the Arab world, now there is an understanding that as long as Hamas is basically as an attempt to hold on its lines and to express sort of unity, as long as Hamas is clinging to the Iranian/tough hard line, it will be more and more difficult for the Arab world to navigate in a way that in the end of the day could help the Palestinians. And that in its turn is going to refuel Palestinian anger and criticism on Hamas. I think that Hamas is heading to a deepening crisis.
All right, well, we are out of time, but Avi Melamed, I want to thank you so much for your insights on this issue.
Thank you for having me.
Israel has long accused the UN Palestinian aid agency UNRWA of being complicit in October 7th massacre by Hamas terrorists. Now a UN investigation is substantiating at least some of these claims. An internal UN investigation has found that at least 9 UNRWA employees directly participated in the massacre. Israel says it's too little, too late, and says the organization must be disbanded. The United Nations has finally acknowledged that 9 staff members of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, may have been involved in the October 7th massacre by Hamas and will be fired from the organization. The UN carried out an internal investigation by its Office of Internal Oversight Services, which looked into 19 UNRWA members that Israel had accused of being involved in the attacks. The report, which will not be made public, found that there was only sufficient evidence to implicate 9 of these employees.
Out of those 19, that in 10 cases, there's either no information or insufficient information to support the allegations of their involvement in the October 7th attacks. The 9 for whom there is sufficient information will be terminated. And that of course, includes some who had been terminated earlier as in the immediate aftermath of the reporting.
A number of countries, including the United States, cut their funding to UNRWA after the revelations of its involvement in terrorism came to light. Yet several countries are now reinstating funding to the organization. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, said the investigation was a disgrace and that it was too little, too late. In a statement, he said that the investigation ignored the thousands of agency employees involved in Hamas terrorist activities and the scope of their involvement. He said that Israel has provided the UN with precise details of over 100 UNRWA employees who are members of the terrorist organization Hamas. Yet, despite the cooperation and information that Israel passed on to the UN, the conclusions of the investigation are another stain on the UN, which still refuses to recognize the reality. Erdan added that if that wasn't enough, the Secretary General recently chose to award UNRWA Gaza the UN Secretary General's Award for 2023. And he called on Antonio Guterres to resign and to shut down UNRWA. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. Stay safe and see you next week.